The time for silence is over. There was once an unprecedented time in American history when common citizens of their day began to define the rights of man and documented how those rights were being violated by their current government. They wrote to each other. They debated with each other. Ultimately, it was these common citizens who recorded these rights for all eternity, and furthermore created a new and free nation founded on these rights with liberty and justice for all of its citizens. Times have changed, but these rights remain.
I don't take responsibility.
That all citizens have the right to life. That all citizens have the right to pursue happiness. That all citizens are created equal. That all citizens have the right to a public trial. That all citizens have the right to peacefully assemble. That all citizens have the right to petition their government. What happens when you try to exercise these rights today? Is this government honoring your rights? Or are they violating them? Is this the government that those citizens aspired to? There is a solution.
I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility. I don't take responsibility.
Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. Join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honored tradition. Hello and welcome to the Left Speaks. My name is Chris. Today is June the 20th, 2021, 5 months and 14 days removed from the insurrection attempt on the United States Capitol building as incited by President Donald Trump, for which there have still been no consequences for the former president. Happy Father's Day, everybody. Happy belated Juneteenth to everybody, which is what we're going to be discussing today and diving into. 14 House Republicans voted against the founding or declaration of Juneteenth as a federal holiday. Juneteenth, for those who are not aware, has been a holiday in the state of Texas for quite some time. It is when Union soldiers finally arrived in Galveston, Texas, to inform the slaves in that state that they were no longer the property of other human beings, that they had been freed, that the Confederacy was over, and that their suffering, as slaves anyway, was at an end. 14 House Republicans, 0 Democrats voted against this declaration, and the Senate was unanimous in confirming Juneteenth as a federal holiday. Seems like a pretty basic thing to be okay with being a federal holiday. But we're going to look specifically at the reasons of those 14 House Republicans and why they felt that they needed to oppose this. We're also going to go into why those reasons are complete and utter bullshit and look at why they felt safe or encouraged to oppose this. I won't spoil it for you. So, diving right into it. What is Juneteenth? It's an abbreviation of June 19th. June 19th, 1865, as I mentioned earlier, African Americans in Galveston, Texas, were told they were free. It has been a celebration in many different parts of the country, from Atlanta to Galveston, as a memorial of the ending of chattel slavery in the United States of America. Obviously, that was not ended in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. Hence why the federal government, the vast overwhelming majority of the federal government, felt the need to establish Juneteenth as a federal holiday. It would seem to be a pretty momentous moment to mark in United States history. The day when we not only said all men were created equal back in 1776, but also the day when we said all other persons that we had been counting as 3/5 of a person prior to that were included in that all men are created equal statement. You can look at one as the declaration of our intent and look at the other as one step out of many, but a very important step in fulfilling that statement. June 19th, 1865 was 2 months after Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered. Robert E. Lee was the general in charge of the Confederate Southern Army, the Army of Northern Virginia, surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse to Union forces. It is basically marking the ending of the Confederacy and the ending of slavery being fought over in this country. Obviously, back then, you didn't exactly have cars and airplanes, so it took a couple of months for Union forces to reach Galveston, Texas, and inform the slaves there that they were no longer slaves. The Emancipation Proclamation had been issued more than 2.5 years earlier. That was the speech in which, or that was the declaration in which President Abraham Lincoln at the time said that all slaves in the southern states would be freed. Took 2.5 years to make good on that from that point. But remember that. It'll come up later. Holiday received its name by combining June and 19th. The day is also sometimes called Freedom Day or Emancipation Day. Original celebration was annually, obviously, on June 19th. I don't know why they felt the need to clarify that, but there you go. Celebrations reached new heights in 1872 when a group of African American ministers and businessmen in Houston purchased 10 acres of land and created Emancipation Park. So in other words, this isn't a created holiday out of the middle of nowhere. Galveston has remained a busy site for Juneteenth events over the years. Obviously, it was down during the pandemic. previous efforts have failed to make it a national holiday. Though Texas declared it a holiday in 1980. Since then, 45 states and the District of Columbia have moved to officially recognize the day. So again, this is not a made-up, created holiday, as some people on Twitter have told me. It's been being pushed for or recognized in 45 states, plus the District of Columbia. That's what you call broad appeal. When you got 45 out of 50 states and 1 out of 2 for the states that should be. Obviously, the murder of George Floyd, which we can call it a murder now since the murderer has been convicted, played a huge role in pushing this declaration to the forefront of national politics. These are your 14 House Republicans, again, the only ones in the federal government who felt the need to vote against declaring this momentous day in American history a federal holiday, marking the occasion as something that is important enough that we recognize it federally. Representative Thomas Massie, Representative Scott DeJarlis, Representative Mo Brooks, Andy Biggs, Tom Tiffany, Doug LaMalfa, Tom McClintock, Mike Rogers, Matt Rosendale, Ronnie Jackson, Ralph Norman, Andrew Clyde, Chip Roy, and Paul Gosar, or Gosser if you prefer. I have no idea how to pronounce this name. There's a few similarities here. They're all Republicans. They're all white. They're all men. But let's go into their reasons. Maybe they had good reasons for this. Maybe they had good reasons for opposing it. We'll start with Representative Mo Brooks from Alabama. Republican again, because of course. Brooks was questioned by AL.com, Alabama paper, about why he was opposing this. He thought that the end of slavery was huge for America and ought to be celebrated as much as the 4th of July. He said that the bill should have been celebrating the Emancipation Proclamation or the passage of the 13th, 14th, or 15th Amendments or the end of the Civil War, any of which would have been dates of national significance rather than a date apportioned to one state. So his first objection is basically, we shouldn't celebrate when Union soldiers showed up in the state of Texas. We should celebrate the Emancipation Proclamation or the establishment of the 13th, 14th, or 15th Amendments. The Huntsville congressman, because again, Alabama, also said he had fiscal concerns about the bill, noting that it would add a federal holiday, would cost the country $1 billion in lost productivity by giving federal workers a day off. That cost should have been offset by eliminating one of the other holidays so that taxpayers don't once again have to foot the bill for paying millions of people not to work. So it's going to be too expensive. Asked which federal holiday should be cut to add this one, Brooks said he had some thoughts, but he wasn't going to volunteer a holiday and get a group of folks unnecessarily mad at me unless it was going to basically actually happen. So, number one objective, we're picking the wrong day, apparently, and the wrong thing to celebrate. Number two objection, it's going to cost too much. For objection number one, the Emancipation Proclamation itself didn't free anybody. It said that slaves would be freed in the southern states, but not that they were free. Also, this is a holiday that is already recognized in multiple states and is recognized or has been being pushed to be recognized in the vast, overwhelming majority of states. Remember, 45 of them. Why would we need to create a federal holiday when instead we can just recognize one that already exists? As to objection number two, well, one more thing on objection number one. I was unable to find any record of Representative Mo Brooks proposing any of these other days as federal holidays to mark the end of slavery prior to the discussion of Juneteenth coming up. So it seems like a load of bullshit. I mean, maybe if there was bill after bill after bill in Congress with Representative Mo Brooks's name on it saying, hey, we need to have Emancipation Day on June the 10th for, I don't know, the last 4 or 5 years, I might take his objection seriously. But considering he has done, from what I could find, and if anybody finds anything different, feel free to send it to me. You can link it to me on Twitter. You can DM me on Twitter. You can go to the website, theleftspeaks.com. All my contact information is there. By all means, get it to me. But this did not seem to be a very important topic to Representative Brooks until he needed to find a reason to object to it. As for objection number two, that it is going to cost $1 billion, and that is just too much damn money. Let's look at that for a minute. That deserves to be looked at a little bit more in depth. So I'm not even going to argue with his $1 billion estimate. Going to plug in $1 billion. Federal government budget is $4.79 trillion for 2020 or 2021. It is, I'm going to round, it is 0.02% 0.02% of the federal budget. And if you saw me glance over here at my sheet of paper, it's because $4.79 trillion has a lot of zeros. So I wanted to make sure I didn't add any extras or leave any off. I wrote it down before we started. I know $1 billion sounds like a lot of money to you and me, but to the federal government, it is 0.02%. And we're not even talking about footing the bill for this. We're talking about lost productivity. But I was curious. I really was. How much would that be to the average American? What is 0.02% of the median wage in the United States of America, which comes out to $33,133? $6.62. $6 whole dollars and 62 cents. And I'm being generous here because I'm using the average American's entire wage, not their tax burden, not what they pay in federal taxes, which would be a more accurate number. I'm using their whole damn income. But Representative Brooks wants you to believe that he has fiscal concerns about $6.62. One, two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've covered your portion for you, Mr. Brooks. That was not that difficult. To celebrate the end of chattel slavery in the United States of America. I even rounded up. $7 whole dollars. Here. You can have it. Ridiculous. I mean, at least just come out and say it. Say what your actual problem is. You expect me to think your actual problem is $6.62? Oh, but Chris, you're being unfair. See, I took the average American salary. United States congressmen make $174,000 a year, not 33. $20, $40. You can have that too. How hard was it? Jesus. All right. Let's see if anybody else has anything better. Andy Biggs from the Arizona 5th.
Here from Arizona's 5th Congressional District. We're about to go vote on a bill that makes Juneteenth a federal national holiday. The Democrats have labeled it Juneteenth National Independence Day. And what it is really is it's Emancipation Day. They could have made this a really harmonious, celebratory bill, because I think everybody would have passed this thing out unanimously if they would have taken it through committee, and they would have changed the name to Juneteenth National Emancipation Day, because that's what it celebrates, is the emancipation of the slaves. But they've weaponized this bill like they weaponize everything else. They want to divide, and that's just a shame, because I support the celebration of Juneteenth. I think that is critical. It's an important part of our nation's history. And if they would have named this correctly, and if they would have included Republicans, if they would have said, let's join together to celebrate the Emancipation Proclamation and the starting of the end of this dark time in our history, I think they would have had this great opportunity to unify Congress and maybe send a signal to America that we can unify in a time of stark divisions. But instead they weaponized the bill, and I'll be voting no.
It is so hard to take that seriously. They weaponized the bill because they used the word independence instead of the word emancipation. So I can't vote for it. And if they'd have sent it back to committee, in other words, not passed it, then they could have had unity instead of division. 14 out of 435 voted against passing this. Even batshit crazy Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't vote against this bill. 0 Republicans in the Senate voted against this. How much more unified do you think changing the word independence to emancipation would have made the passing? You think you would have gotten your vote and maybe 1 or 2 more? I really am curious. And you saw that little smirk there on his face? Democrats have divided us. If only 14 members of the legislative branch out of 535 between the Senate and the House voted against this, I think that's a pretty popular, broad base of support. So I don't think your problem had anything to do with unity. As for emancipation versus independence, dictionary.com, since apparently this is difficult for a sitting U.S. congressperson. Freedom from the control, influence, support, aid, or the like of others. Freedom from the control of others. I would think ending the state of slavery. Thanks for the pop-up ad. I would think ending the state of slavery, where one person, by definition, owns another person as property, would be ending the state of control. I'm sorry that you apparently prefer the word emancipation, but independence seems to be a perfectly reasonable word to use. So again, Representative Biggs from Arizona, please tell us what your actual objection really is. Or do I simply need to buy a dictionary or thesaurus for you? Number 3 on our list of objectors, Andrew Clyde from Georgia. Every member of Georgia's delegation voted in favor of the measure except for U.S. Representative Andrew Clyde, centered out of Athens, Georgia. Clyde said he supported the holiday but didn't like its title, Juneteenth, National Independence Day, because July the 4th is already recognized as America's Independence Day. July the 4th is recognized as America's Independence Day, but back in July the 4th, 1776, independence did not apply to all Americans. Since I can't go back in time and fix that, and we didn't really fix it until after the end of the Civil War, and we've already established that the word independence has a definition that fits, do I need to buy you a dictionary and a history book too? Or can you tell me what your objection really is? And unfortunately, these are going to start repeating themselves just a little bit. Representative Scott DeJarle, and I have no idea if I'm saying that correctly, from the state of Tennessee. Representative DeJarle voted no on House Resolution 479 because he believes it is fiscally irresponsible to continue to create new paid holidays for federal workers, while the majority of hard-working private sector employees get left to pay the bill. Do you need $7 too? Is that really your objection? Seriously. Because if you need the $7, I'm sure we can find a way to scrape it together for you. Representative Mo Brooks still hasn't come up and picked up his $7, so if you want to beat him to it, come on. If he does show up to pick it up, I'm sure I can find a way to scrape together $7 for you. Representative Paul Gosar from Arizona. He actually released an official statement. So props for not trying to bury it in some local newspaper somewhere. After voting no, our country is divided, and the cultural and political Marxists are continuing their relentless efforts to divide this country further. Juneteenth is more debunked critical race theory in action. I reject racism. I reject the racial divisions people are promoting. I voted no because this proposed holiday does not bring us together. It tears us apart. I cannot support efforts that further racial divisions in this country. We have one Independence Day, and it applies equally to all people of all races, concluded Congressman Gosar. So apparently, your objection is also the inclusion of the word independence. I'll buy you a thesaurus. That's one of your many objections anyway. I'll buy you a dictionary. I'll send you a link to dictionary.com/independence so you can read the definition and understand the meaning of the word. As for us having one Independence Day, that one Independence Day did not apply to Black Americans in this country at the time that we founded this country. I don't see anybody out there suggesting that we should remove the celebration of the 4th of July. I have no idea how you replace something when it's still there. Maybe you need a link to the dictionary.com definition of the word replace. If I still have a thing, I haven't replaced that thing. I might have gotten another thing, but by definition, it didn't get replaced. This isn't hard. Now, as for the critical race theory nonsense boogeyman you raised, A, I don't think you know what it is. But B, if critical race theory means that students are going to learn that when we founded the country, there were still people in slavery, and that those people in slavery did not achieve their freedom, their independence, to use the word you don't like, until almost 100 years later, I think that's something we should teach. That's just basic historical fact. And again, since I can't go back in time and change it, I'm not interested in ignoring the reality of American history. You don't learn from your mistakes by pretending they never happened. As for our country is divided and the cultural and political Marxists are continuing their relentless efforts to divide this country further, batshit crazy Marjorie Taylor Greene did not vote against this bill. Today I learned, according to a Republican Arizona congressman, Marjorie Taylor Greene is apparently a Marxist. Senator Ted Cruz didn't vote against this. Today I learned, according to this guy who doesn't know what a Marxist is, that Senator Ted Cruz is apparently a Marxist. Donald Trump at one point said he would be okay with making Juneteenth a federal holiday. Today I learned, according to one random Republican congressman out of the state of Arizona, that Donald Trump is a Marxist. Sir, I say this with all due respect. I don't think you know what words mean. I think you think the word Marxist is a boogeyman for anybody you don't like. I think you think the word critical race theory or the phrase critical race theory is a boogeyman that you can apply to anything you don't like. My 5-year-old doesn't believe in boogeymen anymore. If you have a real objection, instead of scary monsters under the bed, feel free to bring it to the table, sir. On to the next one. Ronnie Jackson, Texas House Republican. Juneteenth is an important part of our history, especially in Texas, because remember, that's where it started. I support Texas Juneteenth holiday, and I support all Americans who celebrate it. However, I do not support more days off for federal employees. We're fine with Texas employees having the day off, apparently, but not federal. Many Americans feel like the federal government is not doing a good job for them as it is. For example, over 60% of Americans disapprove of Congress job performance. I do not know of any other organization that would reward employees with additional days off with that poor of a job evaluation. We need to create jobs, grow our economy, and combat global threats like China, not create more days off for people who have been totally inadequate at delivering for the American people. So it's too expensive argument again. So I got $7 for Mo Brooks. I got $7 for Mr. Ronnie Jackson here. I think it was Scott DeJarlis. Yeah, from Tennessee. We'll give Mr. DeJarlis another $7. $21 and counting. $21 a year. That's where we're at, guys. But again, remember, this is a problem federally for this representative from Texas, but not for his own state in the state of Texas. Doug LaMalfa, California Republican. Those are kind of rare. Juneteenth is an important part in our history, commemorating the end of a dark period and fulfilling the goal of President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation and the hundreds of thousands that were killed in the Civil War to enforce it. The title of the bill and holiday as the Juneteenth National Independence Day could lead to further racial division, as it now appears we have two different Independence Days. Rather than celebrating a more appropriately named Emancipation Freedom Day. This legislation to create another paid federal day off misses the mark and costs American taxpayers an estimated $600 million. I've enthusiastically supported resolutions commemorating Juneteenth and have happily participated in community events in its celebration. So, couple of objections here. We'll take the easy one first. It's going to cost $600 million. You should have used Mo Brooks's number because you'd have gotten like $6.42 that I'm rounding up to $7. But $600 million is less than $1 billion, almost half. So we'll put you down for $4 out of the $7. Don't worry, Representative Doug LaMalfa, I got your $4. The first part of your objection, that we now have two different Independence Days, rather than celebrating a more appropriately named Emancipation Freedom Day, we've been over the difference or the definition of the word independence, and I'm sorry that historically in this country, independence did not apply to Black Americans. We kind of fucked that up the first time around. We had to fight a whole civil war about it to fix it. I don't believe you are such a snowflake that you are so triggered by the word independence being repeated twice in our federal holidays that you had to vote against a vast, overwhelming majority of the federal government to block this. But if I need to send you a link to the definition of the word independence, I will be happy to do so. You can get in contact with me on the website, and I will do the Google search for you so you don't even have to try. Again, I was unable to find anything about Representative Doug LaMalfa pushing for this in the last few years, pushing bills in Congress, celebrating Juneteenth with a different name to it. Just like Representative Brooks, it seems to me, had this been a priority for you, you have had a few years in Congress to push for bills celebrating Juneteenth without the word independence in it. So it seems like you're just searching for a reason to oppose this as opposed to actually having one. Because I don't consider $4 and ignorance of the definition of the word independence to be real concerns. If you have a real concern, please bring it to the table, sir. Representative Thomas Massie from the great state of Kentucky, which also provides us with Senator Mitch McConnell. Kentucky, please do better. Private sector employees average 8 paid holidays. Last week, you asked Americans whether federal employees should get 11 paid holidays instead of 10. Most would have said no. This week, you're apt to be labeled a racist if you didn't vote for the 11th paid federal holiday. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and say you're using the $1 billion number. So we'll put you down for $7 too, Representative Massie. Man, at the rate we're going, we're up to like 32 whole fucking dollars. I'm going to have to start a GoFundMe. There's no way that I can afford this. Jesus Christ. maybe, just maybe, you're apt to be labeled a racist for opposing this because you are 1 out of 14 people in the entire legislative branch of the government opposing this over less than $7. And again, we're not talking about handing out $7. We're talking about $7 in lost productivity because somebody got the day off. My argument would be private sector employees average 8 paid holidays. Let's fix that. You know, another California Republican, Tom McClintock. I voted against Juneteenth National Independence Day Act because I don't believe it's healthy to reach into the dead past, revive its most malevolent conflicts, and reintroduce them into our age, says United States Representative Tom McClintock from the state of California. Don't let the includes part of Eastern Nevada County mess you up. At least Representative McClintock has an original objection. So it saves me the $6.42, $7. So Representative McClintock, according to this, says that we shouldn't have federal holidays essentially says that we should not have federal holidays that reach into the dead past and revive its most malevolent conflicts and reintroduce them. So in other words, we shouldn't have federal holidays commemorating anything in the past that we fought a war over. I'll give him points for being original. Doesn't seem to make much sense to me, but I'll give him points for being original. Here is a list of all federal holidays. New Year's Day. Okay, that one's not contentious. Birth of Martin Luther King Day. Well, we didn't fight a war over it. We had the whole civil rights movement where, you know, there were riots and police tear gassing people and beating people and sicking dogs on people. And, you know, we had to send in the I believe it was the 101st Airborne to integrate schools. But it wasn't technically a war. So we'll give him a pass on that one. Inauguration Day. That's a peaceful one. President's Day, also known as Washington's birthday, which commemorates President Lincoln and President George Washington, both of whom fought pretty big wars in this country, related to independence, ironically enough. But I'll give him a pass on that one. We're doing the birthday thing. Memorial Day honors the nation's war dead from the Civil War onwards. So this one is quite literally honoring every soldier who has died for this country in every war we have had from the United States Civil War up to current day. Representative McClintock, I have been unable to find any record of Representative McClintock trying to pass a bill removing Memorial Day. You know, something that brings up contentious, malevolent events from our past, things we fought wars over. Representative McClintock seems just fine with Memorial Day. For the record, so am I, but I'm not the one saying that we shouldn't commemorate past contentious events. I mean, stick to your guns here, Representative McClintock. Juneteenth is obviously under discussion. Independence Day celebrates the adoption of the Declaration of Independence from British rule, also called the 4th of July. I've also been unable to find any record of Representative McClintock trying to pass a bill removing Independence Day as a federal holiday. You know, that contentious part of our past where we separated from the British government and developed or declared self-rule. We wouldn't want to bring up any contentious, malevolent pieces of our history, according to Representative McClintock. Labor Day honors and recognizes the American labor movement. Again, technically not a war, but extremely contentious, you know, with the Pinkertons being hired by monopolies to come in and bust up strikes and sending in the police to break up strikes and establishing workers' rights in this country. Seems pretty contentious to me. Columbus Day. Columbus Day would be fairly contentious if you were a Native American. I'll leave it at that. Thanksgiving Day. Hey, we found one that wasn't contentious. Holy shit. Christmas Day. Another one that's not contentious, assuming you're Christian. Veterans Day honors all veterans of the United States Armed Forces. Observed on November 11th to recall the end of World War I. I don't believe it's healthy to reach into the dead past, revive its most malevolent conflicts, and reintroduce them into our age. It seems like the vast majority of existing federal holidays reach into our past to celebrate something that was contentious and fought over. And we kind of decided that it was a good thing that those things were fought over. And we celebrate the victory, you know, just like Juneteenth. But as soon as Representative McClintock wants to put his bills where his mouth is, and use that line of reasoning to propose bills removing all of these as federal holidays, I will believe him to be sincere in his objection. Right now, I think he's simply full of shit. Cave-dwelling cannibal witch, welcome back in, man. I appreciate you being here. Juneteenth cannot be a holiday. It is not devoted to a saint. Holidays are for celebrating the saints. From the moderator Dash Mickey, I don't believe religion has anything to do with Independence Day either, but it's a holiday. From Cannibal Witch, all of these are fake holidays except for Christmas. So the only holidays that count for Cannibal Witch there is anything that's directly tied to the Catholic saints, apparently. Unfortunately, the Constitution of the United States, and yes, I know you're probably trolling, Cannibal. Fortunately, the Constitution of the United States provides for a separation of church and state. So while we recognize some of those holidays, that's not the only thing we're going to recognize federally. On to the next objection. Maybe we'll get a unique one again. Ralph Norman, South Carolina Republican. My statement on the Juneteenth vote. First of all, our Independence Day is July the 4th, period. Independence Day celebrates the anniversary of our declared independence from Great Britain, and it's been that way for 245 years. If you want to call Juneteenth, for example, Freedom Day or Emancipation Day, then fine. That's certainly worth considering. Note, he'll consider it. He's not saying he'd vote for it, just that it's worth considering. But calling it Independence Day is wholly inappropriate. Second, we can't just add new federal holidays without considering the ramifications. When Obama issued an executive order in 2014 giving federal employees an extra day off, that cost the government roughly $660 million, according to the Congressional Budget Office. So given inflation and the obnoxious growth of the federal government, this means Juneteenth holiday should easily cost the federal government over $1 billion every single year in federal and holiday premiums. We have no idea why what the impact of any of this would be on the government or private sector. Sure we do. They'd have the day off and it'd cost about $7 of the average American median income. I'll put you down for $7 as well. Ralph Norman. Okay, cool. Easy. Problem solved. First of all, to go back to your original objection, Independence Day is July the 4th. As we've pointed out countless times now, the independence we declared on July the 4th did not apply to Black Americans in half of this country. I will send you a link to the definition of the word independence, along with the other House Republicans, 14 of them, that apparently don't know the definition of the word independence. I can't go back in time and make July the 4th apply to all Americans. But I can at least mark with a federal holiday the date that we made it apply to all Americans. It seems like the least I could do. From the mod. So once again, your beliefs only have you celebrating holidays connected to the saints. Therefore, do that. Once again, not everybody celebrates all the holidays due to their beliefs. No one is saying you have to. From Cave Dwelling Cannibal Witch, holiday equals holy day. There cannot be a secular holiday. Obviously, there can be, since a lot of the 12, 13 now federal holidays are secular. Dash Mickey, just so you know, cannibal is generally just being silly. They like to present ridiculous opposition positions. They're good people, though. So don't take it too seriously. Let's just canonize Frederick Douglass and end the whole debate. I don't think the federal government has the ability to canonize anybody. So to go back, let's go to the next one. We're on Mr. Norman. Let's see what Mike Rogers, Republican from Alabama, had to say. He was dumb enough to just, or he was smart enough rather, to just vote no and keep his mouth shut as to why. So I'll leave that guess up to you. Still has not made a statement as of yet. Mike Rogers, Alabama Republican. Matt Rosendale, representing the great state of Montana. Let's call an ace an ace. Good avoidance of the word spade there, by the way. This is an effort by the left to create a day out of whole cloth to celebrate identity politics as a part of its larger efforts to make critical race theory the reigning ideology of our country. Since I believe in treating everyone equally, regardless of race, and that we should be focused on what unites us rather than our differences, I will vote no. Let's call an ace an ace. This was already, Juneteenth was already a holiday or on its way to being a holiday or pushed in 45 out of 50 states. 45 out of 50 states. It's been in existence in Texas for how many decades now? So no, the fact that it has a history in the great blue state of Texas means we can't be creating a federal holiday out of quote unquote whole cloth. You simply do not know what you are talking about. As part of its larger efforts to make critical race theory, oh, there's that boogeyman again, the reigning ideology of our country. Critical race theory isn't an ideology. It is a method or lens through which you can view certain pieces of history taught at the graduate level. It's no different than looking at history through great man theory or a more populist people's history theory or an economic lens. So you can put your boogeyman away. Since I believe in treating everybody equally, regardless of race, if that's true, July the 4th, 1776, we declared our independence from Britain. Black Americans in this country were still in chattel slavery. The only difference to them was that their white owners did not have to pay taxes to the King of England. I would be willing to bet that they did not give a shit who their owners paid taxes to before the War of Independence or after the War of Independence. So why don't we celebrate their independence too? I have no issue celebrating the founding of this country and the ending of slavery. None. And I don't know why this is a problem for you. Chip Roy, Republican from the state of Texas. Today I voted against S475, the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act, which would establish a new national holiday called Juneteenth National Independence Day. Juneteenth should be commemorated as the expression of the realization of the end of slavery in the United States, and I commend those who worked for its passage. I could not vote for this bill, however, because the holiday should not be called Juneteenth National Independence Day, but rather Juneteenth National Emancipation or Freedom or otherwise Day. This name needlessly divides our nation on a matter that should instead bring us together by creating a separate Independence Day based on the color of one's skin. We asked Democrats to work with us on the floor to change the name to one that properly recognizes the importance of the day without creating a separate Independence Day. However, Democrats refused. As a country, we must stop dividing ourselves by race and unite in our common pursuit of the ideals set forth in our Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. Again, back to you. The Declaration of Independence in 1776 on July the 4th declared that all men were created equal, but it took us quite a while to get around to making that an actual fact. Having a second National Independence Day, quote unquote, that celebrates making good on that promise is not a problem for me. I do not feel divided by race because Juneteenth, National Independence Day, has the word independence in it. Not even a little bit. I promise you, Representative Chip Roy, that no one is going to get offended if you hold a barbecue on June the 19th and you hold a barbecue on July the 4th. I don't see, maybe I'm wrong here because I'm not psychic, but I don't see anybody kicking down the door to your house on June the 19th and saying you can't celebrate it because you're the wrong race. This is ridiculous. Tell me what your real reason is. Catch up with chat real quick. Cave-dwelling cannibal witch apparently knows the Pope's Discord, and you will tell him to get Frederick Douglass cannibalized. Almost got me. Canonized. Do that. If you've got the Pope's Discord, I'd also love for him to weigh in on the bishops that just said that they wanted to, vote to deny Joe Biden communion. Dash Mickey agrees with me. There was no one else in chat, so she was picking a fight with cave-dwelling cannibal witch. Y'all two have fun. From which as well, 0% of the people who are afraid of critical race theory have any idea what it is. I agree. The only real issue that you have with Juneteenth is it's not very portmanteau. I'm going to need you to use a different word for that one, my friend. Last but not least, Tom Tiffany from Wisconsin, number 14. 14 of 14 to vote against it. In his statement, once again, House Democrats have used their majority to balkanize our country and fuel separatism by creating a race-based Independence Day. There is only one Independence Day as America, just as there is only one national anthem, one American flag, and one America, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It is unfortunate that some have chosen to politicize the naming of this important historical event, one of the many momentous milestones in America's shared journey that began in 1776 to create a more perfect union, to turn Americans against one another and foment division based on skin color instead of uniting us. There were 195 Republicans in the House who voted in favor of making Juneteenth a holiday, including 4 from Mr. Tiffany's great state of Wisconsin. It doesn't seem to me that this is dividing anybody. So your concern seems entirely made up. I wish you would tell me what your real concern is, but your concern seems entirely made up. We have now made it through all 14 of the Republicans objecting to this. We're going to take a 5-minute break. And when we come back, we're going to dive into why it was these 14 members who objected. And why it didn't enjoy such mass appeal. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for sticking with us through the break. Now we're going to dive into why it was these Republicans in particular. Mo Brooks, Alabama's 5th Congressional District. Extremely safe Republican seat. Since the year 2000, has not voted for a Democrat, at least. Extremely safe Republican seat. In other words, your only threat of losing this seat is to someone who is more Republican or conservative than you. Andy Biggs, Arizona 5th Congressional District. Extremely safe Republican district. Over the last 20 years, has not gone to a Democrat. Your only chance of losing this seat is to another Republican, someone who is more conservative or more quote-unquote Republican than you are. Paul Gosar, Arizona 4th. If you just look at the map, that looks a little suspicious. Oh, maybe this will contradict my theory. Up until 2008, it went Democrat. So only for the last 10 years has it gone Republican. I wonder what could have happened. After the 2010 census, this district essentially became the 7th district, while a new 4th was created out of mostly rural western and northwestern portion of the state. So they redrew the map for this district in 2010. Oh, look at that. 2008 and prior, it was blue. 2010 and beyond, it was red. So I have to ignore everything from 2010 and before because it's not the same district anymore. Just happens to have the same number. 67, 68, and 68% Republican since 2010, since its existence in its current form. So this is a safely Republican seat as well. Your only chance of losing it is having somebody come along that is, quote unquote, more Republican and more conservative than you are. Andrew Clyde, Georgia's 9th Congressional District. For the last 20 years, safely Republican. All over 70%. Well, I mean, I guess the year 2000 was 69% Republican, but I feel comfortable in rounding that up to the number 70. Again, your only chance of losing this seat is to somebody coming along and running that is, quote unquote, more Republican and more conservative than you are. Tennessee 4th, Scott DeJarle. Last 20 years, consistently Republican. for the last 15 years, over 60%. Ronnie Jackson, Texas 13. 68% for Bush, 78% for Bush, 77% for McCain, 80% for Romney, 80% for Trump, and 79% for Trump. I have to oppose any kind of holiday celebrating the end of slavery because of my district. Because I can't be primaried by somebody more Republican than me. Doug LaMalfa, California First. (2010) to keep it fair. 2008 they voted for Obama. 2000 they voted for Gore. Since 2012, solidly Republican with the exception of their senators. Does this one disprove my theory about solidly Republican states or districts? The redistricting after 2010 census made the district much more Republican leaning. Okay, so after 2010, Republican, 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 Republican. We got one Democrat at least. Republican. We got one Democrat replacing Kamala Harris again. Republican. All over 55%. Some into the 60s. One into the 60s. So again, your only chance of losing this seat is if somebody comes along that's more quote-unquote conservative than you are. Thomas Massey, Kentucky 4th. 20 years solidly red, over 60%. Tom McClintock, California 4th. That's a whole lot of red. That's a whole lot of red. We got Kamala Harris and Kamala Harris's replacement in there. That's it. Ralph Norman, South Carolina 5th. Solidly red for 20 years. Mike Rogers, Alabama 3rd, solidly red for 20 years. Matt Rosendale from the state of Minnesota. They only get one, so it's at large. Or excuse me, state of Montana. Solidly red. Only time it came close was in 2008 between Obama and McCain. Chip Roy, Texas 21. Red for 20 years. Tom Tiffany, Wisconsin 7th. Gore, Kerry, Obama, Romney, Trump, Trump. 2008 and prior, it was blue. 2012 and after, it was red. I feel like we've seen this before. So that was the Wisconsin 7th District. So let's see. Wisconsin 7th District redistricting. Following the 2010 census, Wisconsin was apportioned 8 congressional seats. So it was redrawn in 2010 again. So if I look at 14 completely non-competitive districts, districts where the only competition would be another Republican, I think it would be fair for me to assume that those are going to be your most Republicans, because their only threat of losing their seat is having somebody come along that's a Republican that runs against them that is more Republican than they are. And in these 14 seats, in these 14 districts where apparently only a Republican can win, these are the 14 seats that apparently have a problem with celebrating the end of slavery in this country. Republicans, if you want to know why a large portion of the country thinks that you have a problem with race in the United States, it's because of shit like this. Does that mean that every Republican is a racist? No, it does not. But when I look at the seats where Democrats cannot compete for whatever reason, the Republicans who are representing those districts that are holding that seat are so scared of touching anything related to race in a good way that they can't even celebrate the end of fucking slavery in this country. Now, we've been through all of their statements and shown why those statements are creative at best, and I would say obviously bullshit. But you see this in some of the safest Republican seats in the country. You need to fix your party. And this wasn't the only thing I looked at. I looked at maybe it was the districts that had extremely low populations of African American citizens. And there's some correlation there. But there were some that were in the middle. Maybe it was the districts that had some of the largest white populations. There's some correlation there, but there's some that was in the middle. Maybe it's seats that just, or districts that just have low amounts of minority citizens living in them. And there's some correlation there. But again, not overwhelming. But what was overwhelming is that in every single one of the 14 districts that voted against recognizing and celebrating the end of slavery in this country, they were safe Republican seats. And the only threat to being elected that these representatives are going to ever face until these districts are redrawn is somebody coming along that's more Republican than they are. And unfortunately, these representatives feel that celebrating the end of slavery in this country would make them vulnerable to being primaried by another Republican. You have gone from being the party of Lincoln, from issuing the Emancipation Proclamation and founding around the ending of slavery in this country, to a party where your most safe seats are scared to celebrate that history. If you wonder why a lot of people on the left and a lot of Democrats think that the Republicans as a party, not as individuals, have a problem with racism right now, this is why. This is one of many illustrations why. On that note, I think we're going to wrap it up a little bit early today. It is Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. And as always, if you've got anything, any sources, any links, anything you want me to see, you can go to the website, theleftspeaks.com, and send it to me via email, Facebook Messenger, Twitter, or you can always call in. Number's right down there. And it's always toll free, and it's on whenever I'm live. If you've got a different opinion, if you've got different evidence, I want to see it. Because I'm more interested in being correct than I am in sticking to an ideology. Thank you for joining us. This has been The Left Speaks, and I will see you next week. Have a wonderful Father's Day, everybody.